Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back to these Tectonic Conversations. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and your host of these Tectonic Conversations. Today, on this April 1st, Tuesday, 2025, we are continuing with our Deloitte Tech Trends 2025 series of live webcasts. And I am thrilled to be welcoming a genuinely global world-class panel today to unpack a very, very important topic, the topic of cryptography in the age of quantum. This session is live for a reason. We want to make sure that you, audience members, get the opportunity to interact with our panelists. So if you do have any comments or questions as we proceed in the conversation today, please feel free to use the Q&A function of this Zoom platform, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can. Now, I mentioned we're going to have a very impressive panel today. Let me very briefly introduce the panel. First, I'd like to welcome Matt Scholl. Matt, thank you very much for your time today. It's a pleasure to have you on this panel.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Matt is the director of Computer Security Division at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is an institute part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Thank you very much, Matt, for finding the time to be with us and share your wisdom. And next, I'm thrilled to introduce Colin Suter. Colin.
Thank you,
Lovely to see
you. Great to see you, and I'm very happy to be here today. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. I look forward to it.
Sure shall. We'll make it interesting.
We will.
Colin is with Deloitte. Colin is the global quantum cyber readiness leader at Deloitte. Very much looking forward to hearing your experience and your wisdom that you're going to share with us today, Colin. And last but certainly not least, Irene Weir, also from Deloitte. Greetings.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here. I am with the Deloitte US Office of the CTO. So my role is really helping Deloitte tackle our bold plays and turning big ideas into real scalable solutions that differentiate us in the market. So no better place to be today.
No better place than here and than now, exactly. So Irene, this, as our audience would know, we are doing Deloitte's Tech Trend Unveil. This is the third year actually in a row that we are doing it this way through Tectonic Conversations live webcasts. And this is episode 6, where we're going to do a deep dive into the trend number 5, the trend that is called the new math. But before we do that, I would kindly ask if you can maybe give us a bit of a context about tech trends and lead us to that moment where we're going to do a deeper dive into this particular trend, Irene. So maybe I'll pass the baton over to you, enlighten us, and then let's have the conversation.
Let's do it. All right. Just a quick tech check. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Perfect. And so for those joining the conversation, I know Dalibor mentioned it, the chat is open for Q&A. So we welcome questions and comments and really can take this conversation where we want it to go. So yes, just to level set on the Tech Trends report overall, Deloitte has been publishing Tech Trends for 16 years now. I actually Googled Deloitte's first Tech Trends report, and it's been quite an evolution to see how the structure, the design, everything has changed. But what stands out to me is that it's continuously an annual exploration of what's now, what's new, and what's next in tech. And what I love about the report is that it's really a practical guide to separate signal from noise and really understand what to care about today so we can be prepared for tomorrow. And the report is actually informed from two major components. One is research from industries and academia, and the other one is around really grounding it in perspectives from our clients. And so the Tech Trends team has spent a lot of time talking to clients about their priorities, what they're thinking, and where their investments are going. And so this report really spotlights several industries that are embracing emerging technology and change. So whether you're in cybersecurity, healthcare, or finance, there are stories and perspectives in here that will resonate with you and perhaps inspire change in your field as well. All right, let's keep going. So I do want to take a moment to talk about how Tech Trends is organized overall. This is particularly for those who are just joining us on this journey. So the report is actually organized around macro technology forces. The top three that we have are three elevating forces, or what we call enduring eternities. So interaction, information, and computation. These are really the sources for innovation. So think metaverse, new models and agents for tasks, and advancements in chip design. But really, for those things to thrive, we really have three grounding or foundational forces: the business of technology, cyber and trust, and core modernization. We really need to have our house in order so that these elevating forces can thrive. So think about shifting from project to product, planning for inevitable risks, and re-engineering systems so that they play nicely with what's new and what's next in tech. So, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, when I saw this for the first time, I was like, oh my God, this actually is a framework that can be used by any CIO, CTO to articulate their strategy. Because these are the six things that every technology executive in any organization needs to solve for. And these are organized in such a elegant way. Like, so whoever came up with this at the team, two thumbs and both toes are up. Congratulations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We've been using this framework for a couple years now, and really it's because we're seeing that these forces endure even if the trends within them change. So we've had them for a couple of years. You're going to see them next year and the year after that. Just recognizing that within them the trends are going to change based on the information that we have in the future. So now, actually zooming into 2025, over the last few webcasts, we've talked a lot about the overarching theme for Tech Trends 2025, which is AI is everywhere. The earlier discussions, Dalibor, that you've had, they've done a fantastic job of covering how AI is everything, everywhere, all at once, much like electricity or the internet. And we expect AI not only to work, but to make everything work smarter, faster, and more intuitive. So I really highly recommend for our viewers who are joining us today to check out those past trend deep dives if you haven't done so already. Today is different. We are shifting gears to talk about quantum, a technology that's anticipated to make a big impact and why acting now is critical. So that's going to be the bulk of the conversation today. Let me just go ahead and shift gears here. So Trend 5 is solving cryptography in the age of quantum. Dalibor, when Mike was on with you, he brought up Y2K, and I really loved that analogy. So I'm going to bring that up again just to set the stage for quantum. So for our younger viewers, Y2K is shorthand for this looming invisible crisis that was believed that it could crash systems, disrupt economies, and basically cause global chaos around the world because computers could only use 2 digits for the year. And there was this concern that computers, software, and systems might misinterpret the 00 for 2000 as 1900 or another year and could lead to a variety of problems. Well, it turns out that there were actually very few issues when the clock struck midnight on January 1st, 2000. Why? Because businesses and governments undertook major efforts to correct this issue in advance. Yep. Well, fast forward 25 years, we're now in our Y2Q era. So Q being for quantum. This is that inevitable moment a cryptographically relevant computer, or a supercomputer powered by physics, not mathematics, is powerful enough to break today's encryption everywhere, all at once. Like, let's just take a moment to think about that. That's pretty crazy, you know? But it's not science fiction. This is a countdown. It is happening. Yep. And unlike Y2K, where the deadline was set, the smartest people in the world are saying that Y2Q is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So even though this threat isn't a clock bug, it is an imminent attack on the foundation of our digital trust. It's going to impact identity, transactions, and data integrity. But the good news is that we have Colin and Matt here today to talk about the tools, the standards, and the guidance to prepare. So let's treat Y2Q with the same urgency as Y2K, because the longer we wait, the harder and costlier it's going to get. But we do have tools and we do have guidance so that we can start fixing things now. Anything else?
This was such an intelligent way to describe the moment that we find it. I love this. Y2Q. And the trick is so excellent metaphor and excellent, but the additional problem is that we actually don't know when this will happen. In Y2K, we knew exactly the moment. Imagine now we are facing this challenge that you described, and we do not really know the moment. It could happen.
Right.
You said it could happen 5 to 10 years, but the way things are going these days, there might be an announcement, for goodness sake, unexpectedly any day also, right?
Exactly. And so if we take nothing away from this, acting now is critical. And so we need to start moving on these things. And we have a lot of things in our toolkit today to get started. So I actually want to shift gears and talk about why quantum computing changes the game. So we have Colin and Matt here. Matt, would love to start with you, actually. You are at the forefront of working on post-quantum cryptography. And I'm curious, was there a moment or experience for you when you realized that quantum was going to really threaten today's encryption?
Yeah, so boy, easy question, complicated answer. So let me back up. I'm going to answer it two ways. I'm going to answer it first in the mid 90s, in 1994, there was a quantum mathematician named Peter Shor, pretty smart guy, an academic here in the US, who designed a quantum algorithm. And because his name is Peter Shor, he, of course, wisely called it Shor's algorithm, named it after himself. And so you'll often hear about Shor's algorithm in this discussion. And that algorithm is a quantum algorithm, a piece of quantum mathematics, that if it can be run on a strong enough machine, can basically undermine some of the mathematics that we use for some of the crypto that is pretty well deployed across the world. Not all of it, but unfortunately, the more important ones that are used more often. So we've kind of known since the mid to late 90s that this could be a thing. But at that time, quantum engineering, quantum sciences, the construction of actual quantum machine to run it was not a reality. It was a theory. Fast forward till about 2014, 2015. That's when I was first kind of smacked in the face by a couple of folks working here at NIST, both the physicists who work in quantum and the cryptographers here, who said, we need to think about if this is a thing now, because the quantum engineering space moved from theory to practice. It went from a challenge of research to a challenge of engineering capability. And so in 2015, folks here at NIST, Lily Chen, Dustin Moody, Donna Dotson, who were some of the early leaders here, said, let's have a workshop and talk about this. And so NIST held a public workshop in 2015, asked what we call the community, IT vendors, cryptographers, physicists, do we need to think about this now? And the answer we got from that workshop from everybody was, yeah, let's start working on this. Because historically, we know how long it takes to design, not just design an algorithm, but to accept it, get it into a standard, and then actually get it into stuff and get that stuff into our infrastructures. All of that is a very long life cycle. So we started in 2015 with a long process, multi-year, to design, develop, deploy, and standardize new encryption that Mr. Shor and his algorithm does not affect. So back to a long answer for a short question. The short answer is, yeah, around 2015, I was told this is a thing, to answer your question.
What about you? Was there a moment for you? Was it in 2015 or did you notice it at a different time?
It certainly wasn't 2015, and I do want to take a moment to appreciate all the fine work the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, as we'll call them here, Matt and Donna, Lily, and Dustin, and others over the years have done on this. I mean, when you think about it, that was a decade ago, right? And I started, so my background, I started off in biometrics many years ago, was working for a biometric vendor for about 14 years or so. And so I was familiar with emerging technologies. I happen to have a background in physics as well. And so I understood a little bit about, the capabilities that were there using quantum. And it kind of made sense to me. Some of the PhD work that I was doing was actually somewhat related. In fact, some of the people I knew peripherally have gone on to be part of these new quantum companies and so on. So I kind of understood the basis of it. But when it was introduced to me 5 years ago, it was when I think it was Deb Golden, our cyber lead at the time, was to be on a panel for the World Economic Forum, and she couldn't make it. Something else came up, and so I sat in, and here I was being asked about trusted identities, zero trust, and quantum. What do we know about that? And so I was a bit skeptical at the time, to be honest. I think that it took me probably a couple of years to understand the advances, as Matt just said, about the engineering updates that are being made. And there's been quite a flurry of announcements over the last 3 months or so to show some of the incremental steps that are happening, each of which is a bit of a breakthrough. But it's a breakthrough and it's incremental, right? There's still a long journey to get to something that is fully cryptographically relevant and can break the cryptography, which is why most experts are saying for that particular use case, there's other things that quantum computers can do around modeling and simulation and so on that will likely be here before that date. But the way we sometimes put it is to avoid overshadowing all of those aspects like simulation and modeling, we got to make sure that we deal with the cryptography. We got to make sure that it's done, the upgrades. And we look back in 10 years, as you said, as we did around Y2K, and say, really, it wasn't that big a deal, right? It will be a big deal, but I hope that it gets done in time such that there's not a major incident or the like down there. So in short, I would say about 3 years ago, and there happened to be a panel that I was a roundtable discussion that I was grateful to be at. It was in New York. There were a lot of the financial services industry regulators sitting around a table and trying to determine what's the right gravitas to have on it. Like, should we be thinking about regulations? Where is it all going to go? And the quantum computing vendors were there in large part, and they talked about some of the advances they'd been making. This was last summer. And I think ever since then, I've seen it build upon itself. So I'd say the last couple of years, it's become a lot more serious in terms of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel when they will be available for all these positive applications. But again, alongside that, we need to be starting to take the preparatory steps to mitigate the threat that they will pose.
I see. So that's pretty fascinating. I imagine your skepticism is shared with a lot of clients. So when you're helping them prepare, what's been some of the challenges in getting them to see the urgency of preparing for quantum threats?
So it's funny, two concepts that have been talked about already, I think, are two things that I tend to address with clients. One is I do like the metaphor of Y2Q, but I do wonder a little bit that it gives an impression that there's a particular time and it will be broadly known when this is. There'll be advance notice and the like. So we tend to put it much more in, if you accept that there's a reasonable probability that this is going to occur in the next 5 to 10 years, the question you really need to ask yourself is how long is it going to take to upgrade your infrastructure, your supply chain, and all of those other steps? And it's not inconceivable that will take a decade or longer. So, all right, so you can do the easy math and say we really should have a better understanding today about what the impact will be. Start to build out a roadmap, and that way you can build it into planned upgrades, enterprise transformations. If a system's going obsolete in the next 2 years, you just let that go by the wayside, right? It's much more orderly if you do it that way. The other issue is it was in the Q&A, and it always comes up is what they call harvest now, decrypt later, which is stealing data, an attacker stealing data on the anticipation that they can break it at a later date. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a real threat. It is a real threat. However, the dialogue in my mind gets overshadowed by that threat, which is very important for things like national security, of course, where data and personal information, nobody wants to lose that. So you don't want to forgo any rights to that data. However, if you think about the type of cryptography that we are talking about here, it's called asymmetric cryptography. I don't think we need to get into all the details, but one of the most important things that it does is actually establishes trust between two different entities, whether it's person to machine, or machine to machine. Think about every single financial transaction that we do, where there's trust and there's a knowledge of who's on the other end or what's on the other end. That's where the impact will actually hit the bottom line, because if financial services can no longer trust the integrity of those transactions, they'll have to shut down until they become upgraded, right? So I worry a little bit that there's an over fascination with harvest now, decrypt later. It's also sometimes when the story is being told about when a quantum computer will be available, and we talk about 5 to 10 years, sometimes it's positioned, but wait, there's more. There's harvest now, decrypt later. This is a threat today. I prefer to say that the reason you need to act today is because of what I said earlier, is that even if it's going to be 5 to 10 years before the cryptographically relevant quantum computer exists, if it takes you 10 years to do the upgrades, that's why you have to start today.
Right. That actually makes complete sense, what you just described. That's so the urgency is there, and time to act is now, and how to act is to start upgrading and thinking about your infrastructure and systems that need to be modernized to be ready for the moment that this might happen. And the window you describe is 5 to 10 years, right?
I would flip that around.
Yes.
So, yeah, so much to unpack here in this discussion.
And we're only 5 minutes in.
Right, I know. So the way to start now is to look at, and there's a ton of really good guidance from a lot of different sources about how, just like what Colin was saying, how to plan for this, how to, first of all, identify what crypto you're using and where and what you're using it for. Is it secure communications and confidentiality, or like Colin was saying, is it trust? Is it a trust anchor in some of your identity or assurance or authenticity programs? The encryption that we use really is very foundational for a lot of the other trust extensions that we just naturally give. You know, code signing, cloud infrastructure, interoperability, a lot of these things that we're just doing. Financial transactions, as Colin mentioned. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Inventory, know what you're doing, know what you're protecting, plan, budget, prepare. Don't build now a legacy system 5 years from now that you're going to have to change again. So make sure this is part of your modernization program, of your refresh programs going forward. The standards are still pretty new for the new encryption. We just published them last August. So what that means is product is only now starting to ship, mostly in software services or software updates or planned software updates. It's going to take longer for hardware, those that are based on hardware and hardware accelerators and hardware primitives, then to get tooled up and built and deployed. So my caveat to your statement is don't necessarily buy now unless you're software based. You're going to have an interoperability assurance with those whom you need it, that they're going to either be in a hybrid or a multi application mode to be able to take both old and new going forward, and that it's part of your upgrade plan. So plan, do it well, do it smart, do it once, hopefully. Product is just now rolling. If you have vendors, if you have partners, if you have service providers, make this part of the discussion with them. Ask them, what are their plans for their quantum future, for their quantum resilience, as you have these kind of partnership engagements with them as well. So it's still a little bit early, There are some back-end products that have deployed at scale from some of our more well-known providers. Apple's doing hybrids on iMessage, Amazon's rolling on infrastructure, Cloudflare and Chrome have announced migration dates as well as Azure. But have these conversations with your providers, identify your bespoke legacy systems that you're going to have to do, and then plan.
Yeah, I totally agree with Matt. And if we look at the steps that we typically go through, and to their credit, the financial sector is really starting to embrace this and starting to think about it very seriously. The federal government here in the US has been very active. I mean, again, NIST started this 10 years ago, and there's been a series of executive orders, national security memos, and so on. And I'm sure that will continue going forward. So on the financial sector side, one thing that we tell clients right off the bat is it's going to be a multi-year effort. Obviously, this is a huge effort. So you need to make sure that you have the right support and governance around you. This can't be someone who thinks they want to deal with it, for the next year. So oftentimes we try to have the conversation elevated, and there's particular steps that we're going to be announcing or releasing soon around that to try and elevate that conversation a little bit. And then we say, as Matt said, it's very important to think about what's your strategy here? How are you going to go through the different steps so that you can build out the roadmap? The one area that I think Deloitte does a little differently, certainly from what we're hearing, although I think I saw somebody post something on LinkedIn this morning that alluded to the same sort of activities. We typically go through an initial workshop with a client, 4 hours or so, and we've got all the relevant stakeholders in there. And we start with the very detailed technical layer that is cryptography. But as Matt had kind of alluded, it's so endemic these days in all the things that we do. So we start at that layer, but we very quickly go up the stack through the transport layers, through the functions that they're being implemented, right up to the business processes and the mission of the organization. And there's multiple reasons for doing that. But obviously, as you go through that, first of all, you'll find that an enterprise is not entirely heterogeneous. You don't have to inventory every single portion of your enterprise to start. You'll ultimately want to get there, but to come up with a strategy and a roadmap, you build out these archetypes that are replicated across the enterprise, and you figure out how they relate to your crown jewels or your primary business processes, and say, this is what's most important for us. Let's dig a little deeper in there. Because then you can start to think about the remedies. To Matt's point, we threw some numbers out there about this time last year, and I've not heard anyone yet say that they were totally wrong. I mean, we postulated, right? We think that in terms of remediation, probably around 60 to 65% or so will be handled through hyperscalers and infrastructure and so on. They have a vested interest, obviously, in doing this. There'll be another maybe 20, 25% where it's dedicated security providers like hardware security modules, public key infrastructure, a little bit more specialized. And then there's the gnarly, if I did the math correctly, I was changing the numbers around a little bit, the gnarly 10 to 15% at the end there, that is essentially homegrown use of cryptographic libraries. They'll be hard to track down, but you got to track them down as well and do the upgrades. So my point being that the remediation efforts that you have to do depends on what your depends on what your enterprise is supporting from a business process. And it depends on the importance of those steps. So you might change your strategy. Well, you will, based on what the clients that we've worked with so far. You'll change your strategy and then your roadmap to be tailored to your organization.
I want to have an opportunity for some geek speak here. So why are the encryption methods today vulnerable to quantum? Like, let's get into that a little bit. And what makes the new methods able to withstand these attacks from quantum computers?
Okay, we want to go here, huh? All right. What Shor's algorithm does with a quantum computer that's powerful enough to run it, again, which doesn't exist yet, is it's a new way of doing factorization. It's a new, you could think of it as a new search optimization using a quantum machine. The current encryption that we're using in our binary laptops and enterprise machines that we're all running now the encryption, the asynchronous encryption, as Colin was talking about, which is our, key exchange methods and our digital signatures and our PKIs. They use a hard problem of what's called large integer factorization. Very, very, very big prime numbers that are combined that a binary machine just can't factor out. It's just because of the structure of a machine that's built on ones and zeros. It doesn't have the memory or the horsepower to really ever do an exhaustive key search to find what the secrets were in that encryption. Can't do it because it's limited by its binary nature. When we get to a quantum machine, those limits are not the same because it's not a binary machine. And then through the implementation of Shor's algorithm, if you apply Shor's algorithm to a captured key exchange, you can find the keys that were used to make that communication exchange secret, or to provide the non-repudiation of an item through a digital signature, or to assure the integrity of some code through a PKI or a certificate assurance. So that's bad, is to get technical. The new algorithms don't use large integer factorization. We're using a different hard problem. And the trick is we have to use a different hard problem that is still hard for our classic binary machines. It's still got to be strong enough. It's still got to work because we're going to put it in our commercial infrastructures. But it also has to be not susceptible to Shor and to these new search function capabilities that a quantum machine will have. So they're based on a different sets. The initial ones are based on something called lattices and short vector problems for lattices. And there's a couple of other very well-known hard problems that were kind of in the running when things like RSA and Diffie-Hellman, our current PKI hard problems, were built. But because of optimization and efficiencies, those were chosen. So these are well known. They're pretty well studied. They're pretty well understood by the cryptographic community in general. So we have extraordinary confidence in them. But they're based on lattices. Some of them are what's known as code-based as well. So lattice and code-based, and then hash functions. Hash functions, the ones we generally use, are still quantum safe. And so we're going to take a hash function and use it in some different application areas like in a signature as well. So those are, I mean, I went a little bit deep. I could go deeper,
No.
but I hope that was good enough. Okay. That was all right. I got the okie dokie deep enough. Don't go deeper.
So
Process of selecting those algorithms were pretty competitive, right? So looking back, did it seem like those were the obvious choices to you, or were there something unexpected or challenging when trying to figure out what standards to set?
Yeah, there was, we did this over 6 years, 8 years. How long? Geez, my math
Wow.
is off on that. Yeah, 8 years. So we started in 2016 and we selected the first set of algorithms last year in 2024. So from 2016 to 2024, we ran an open process. We asked people to give us their thoughts, give us their implementations, their candidates, their algorithms. We gathered a set of what we thought was initially just bare bones acceptable, and we had 69 initial algorithms for both signatures and key exchange or key establishment, excuse me. And we narrowed those down. Some got broken. Some we disproved mathematically. Some we disproved the base assumptions on. Some were so close, we said, why don't you two kind of join each other and become one algorithm? Some turned out to be not optimizable, too big, too slow, too brittle in their implementations. And so potentially for performance reasons, we said, no, it's just not going to be acceptable from a user perspective until we finally got down to what we're calling the first three. So these are the first three, like I said, based on lattices and a hash. We're going to continue this process going forward in the future, and we want to look at some of these other, like I said, foundations. We want to keep a diverse gene pool so that should something happen that we don't foresee, we'll have some potential resilience in the cryptographic libraries that we choose going forward.
Maybe to just add, Matt said a couple of times, continuing and ongoing. I want to emphasize that this is, and I think you said this, I think we happened to be together the day after, or the day that they were announced, August 12th or so last year. I think you said it's kind of just beginning, right? I think a lot of people were thinking, okay, NIST has released the 3 algorithms. That's it. Not, just now implemented. I mean, to Matt's earlier point, there's a lot of preparatory work that needs to go in place, and we don't really advocate the clients implement today, right? The algorithms are out there. People have implemented them that are what they call test vectors, that they can say that they look like they perform as expected, but the full cryptographic module certification has not yet occurred on them. So that's the point at which we think clients should start adopting. But before they get to that, really back to strategy and roadmap and figuring out what the methodical plan is to do that. The other point I just want to emphasize that I think Matt said implicitly but not explicitly is that the competition over the last 8 years or so was international. There was a call, there was participation from international. NIST, as the US national, the Institute of Standards and Technologies, is very much recognized internationally for cryptographic standards, these types of things, for lots of other things too, but they're very well renowned for this. We as a company thought that it was extremely important that we set up a global team to address this, and I'm very grateful to lead that team. And we have representation from every corner of the world, pretty much, because we do think that it's very important that key word that Matt had said right at the start is interoperability. And we often talk about trust and security and so on, but really, when it comes down to it, if 2 entities, again, I think of a future date where you're a financial institution, you've upgraded to PQC, it's let's say 6 years from now, there may not yet exist a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, but with all the conjecture going on right now, there might be enough concern that there could be one. I mean, if a nation state, for example, develops one, I don't think they're going to advertise it on a billboard in Times Square in the first thing. They're going to start using it, right? And the nature of the attack, someone asked me this the other day on another discussion, the nature of the attack, it's not like there's a breach and it's identified and there's a spillage, a data spillage, and you've got to do the cleanup, the remedy, and so on. The nature of such an attack is that if someone is able to break into the cryptographic binding between 2 entities, and they're able to insert themselves in there, they would continue authenticating or verifying themselves to the system to that high degree of security that's in place today, entirely undetected, unless they do some anomalous behavior that can be detected through another thing. So it's a very under the cover type attack, right? So that could be going on until it's more broadly known, and then everybody starts panicking. But back to what I said about if a financial institution has implemented and has upgraded, and there's other financial institutions that have not, I think that there's likely to be sort of bi levels of trust there, right? In terms of who they interact with, and that's where, and we're trying to model this out a little bit from an economic perspective, because there's a lot of discussion today about the cost to upgrade. I think that in a couple of years, when there's an expectation of duty of care, now that the standards have been out for a while and tested, there's going to be an expectation of duty of care where it'll actually be, it'll cost something not to have upgraded, because you'll start to lose that trust with other peers in your industry. And I think those are some of the tipping points that we're looking at to try and highlight so that people understand. It's not the urgency, it's not calamitous or anything, but it is something that they should start planning out and think about what the next steps are. Even if they do that and then pause for a couple of years, they're still in a better shape.
What I took away from this conversation is, I think that the threat of quantum computer breaking cryptography to quote unquote steal one's passwords is the one that people who are not deep into this, I think of. That's like a natural go-to when you think about the risk. Somebody will unlock my passwords, they will be able to log in with me, blah, 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 steal information, steal data, steal money. What you're describing here is a different scenario where you are actually shaking the foundation of trust, of key aspects that keep our society glued together and peaceful, right? So it's yes, it is about stealing your widget, but it's like this introduces a threat that your banking transactions might actually be untrustworthy. So this hits at the core of the glue that keeps the society civilized, right?
I think what you
Yes.
just identified, or what the light bulb just went off, is the core trust function that encryption provides.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is a foundation upon which so much of our trust extensions rely upon. And
Yes.
without it, it's difficult to have any other trust abstraction. Yeah, and it's not just like you were saying, my financial transaction, it's the electronic activities within a financial institution.
Yeah.
As Colin was saying, everyone potentially is now an insider.
Yeah.
And it's
So
device to device as well, Dalibor. It's a device. I mean, you think inside a plane or some other
yeah,
vehicle, right? All the device to device connections, they're all interconnected using mutual authentication, which is the bedrock of
yeah.
trust. So yeah, I think
So
that's a good way of putting it. It's less about stealing static data, which again, the harvest now, decrypt later. I understand that is a threat, it's a concern, but the bigger impact is around business operations and continuity, right?
yeah,
You're going to shut things down.
yeah, exactly. So now again, obviously I'm not an expert. I'm learning as we talk, right? What I understood you to say, Matt, is that, and Colin, you mentioned that NIST has published NIST has published essentially new standards and has picked algorithms that NIST believes are sufficiently sophisticated, present new hard problems to the point where quantum computer might not solve it, might not be able to solve it, at least in the foreseeable future. Is that a fair statement?
I'll make that statement even stronger. NIST has published new encryption algorithms that NIST believes, and the rest of the world also believes, as Colin was saying, will be able to keep that trust anchor safe and secure even upon the development of a cryptographically relevant quantum computer of the future. NIST did lead and select those final algorithms, but like we were saying, this was NIST working with 26 other countries around the world, working with open standards bodies, other standards bodies as well, working with other national cryptographic authorities, academia and industry at global scale. Because it's nice that NIST publishes, but it's even better when it gets implemented and adopted across all of the commercial enterprise, commercial tech that we're all going to buy, implement, and deploy across our infrastructures. So
This is
yes,
yeah.
it's a NIST spec, but EU, Asia Pacific, UK, we're all on board.
What you're effectively saying is that we, humanity, we have a solution actually. We know that we have the solution. We figured out solution. So
Yes.
now
Now
we
we
have
need the will to do it.
yes. So now we
Yeah.
have yeah, exactly. So now as leaders prioritize where do they spend their next $100 bill, how do you make sure that they understand? God, like this is likely coming. It might be 5 to 10 years out. And by the way, we all know the joke that quantum computing has been coming for the next 5 to 10 years for the last 30 years. But we might find ourselves surprised in how quickly this actually comes. I think if we rewind 4 years back, not a lot of people would assume that we would be where we are at in terms of generative AI, agentic AI now, right? So we have the solution. The question now is, how quickly will it be that organizations will modernize and upgrade? And so Matt, when you said products
Yeah.
are shipping,
Yeah.
what that means is that the software is being built right now that companies can buy and deploy that will actually that will be leveraging these algorithms on the existing binary computers. Is that fair to say? So you can start actually issuing your cryptography using this modernized, ultra sophisticated, superbly safe math in preparation for the moment when this happens. And that's now your risk balance equation, right?
It is, but again, I think like Colin and I have been saying, this is not something for next Tuesday.
Yeah.
This is,
Right.
have a enterprise integrated migration strategy, and do this thoughtfully. You have some time still to do this thoughtfully. Our pants are not on fire yet.
Yeah.
The government,
Lighter is right here.
that's right.
Lighter is, there are many people who have lighters and light trying, right?
Yeah, the government, if you transition or not, the U.S. government and NIST for many of the crypto algorithms used in the U.S. government also controls the effective dates of. We're going to start to turn off the old ones in 2030, 5 years from now. All right. The U.S. government's very aggressive plan, and this is very aggressive, is to be migrated by 2035. So what that means is, if you wish to sell to, if you wish to communicate with, if you wish to interoperate with, if you wish to engage with the United States government in a secure manner using encryption, you too have been put on the 2030 deprecation, 2035 disallowance, and migrate timeline with us. So quantum computer, not quantum computer, quantum supremacy, not quantum supremacy. You got a timeline.
We got a timeline. So we got a solution and we got a timeline.
Correct.
So let me pull on that thread just a little bit, because, and I was trying to think of the right word, because I don't know that we have a solution yet. We have a fix to that issue, right? There's a way to mitigate the threat on asymmetric cryptography. I think the solution needs to be when there's full executive buy-in in an organization, there's an understanding, a strategy, and I know I'm being a bit pedantic, but there's a lot of conversations that they gravitate immediately to, let's upgrade the cryptography. Matt alluded to this earlier. We've got a concept, well, it's not our concept, but it came up in a discussion we had around cryptographic resiliency, right? There's a term, cryptographic agility, which one of Matt's colleagues at NIST has issued a paper on. We think that resiliency is just a little bit beyond that, because it includes the non-cryptographic, the governance and roles and responsibilities and so on. We've seen areas where clients have wanted to get involved in this, and they've started to do inventory again of the cryptography, and it sort of just gets bogged down. So the solution is really when it gets to that level of executive awareness, much as you see with other emerging tech and the evolution of it. One of the things that we are going to do in the near term to try and assist in that, I had the pleasure of meeting Matt, 12 years ago or so now? 12 years ago, I think. Developing the NIST cybersecurity framework. We were grateful to be helping support and facilitate some of the meetings there, which was, private sector working with NIST to try and come up with what is the right balance of performance outcome-based statements to achieve certain security objectives. Part of the reason I believe that was put together, and certainly the success that we've seen as a firm on the commercial side, is because it can talk at the right level for commercial CIOs, CEOs, and even more importantly, the board.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to resonate very well with some of the recent activities that the US government has been talking about around FedRAMP and so on, where they're talking a little more about performance outcomes and less around specific implementation of controls, which is in line with the NIST cybersecurity framework. We've put together a profile. So a profile is an implementation profile. It gives a little bit more specific guidance on how one can navigate this march towards cryptographic resiliency. In other words, mitigating the quantum cyber risk. We intend to publish it and then submit it to NIST in due course and solicit comments initially ourselves and then put it into NIST and have NIST work its fantastic stakeholder engagement process and see what comes out after there. But the reason we're doing that is because we do think it's an important time to try and rally opinions around something that is actionable, but doesn't dictate what organizations need to do. Yep. You got to get that middle ground. And again, I think the NIST CSF gets that very well. We've seen international enthusiasm for such a path, and maybe even more importantly, on the financial services industry, where there is getting to be a lot of traction, I should say. So that's something that we're doing to try and get out there and get ahead with non-alarmist messaging. To Matt's point as well. You know, the sky can only be falling once. You don't want to go out and say the sky's falling, and then it doesn't. Again, that's why I'm not a huge fan of Y2Q, because it sort of paints the picture of working towards a particular date, and people have a tendency just to keep pushing that out, right?
Talked about that if by 2030, 2035, that you can count the government out as a potential customer if you're not adhering to these standards in the future. I'm curious, just to really drive that home, the clients that are putting off taking this action today, what happens if they continue to delay their efforts? Like, really just want to illustrate what else could be, inevitable for them.
Well, I mean, not just the government, potentially other partners. They potentially would lose, as Colin was saying, the ability to have a trusted exchange over, electronic means with them, which then they become a potentially not preferred partner to have any type of trusted interaction, business, financial, governance, whatever that exchange, might be or might incur. The longer road is that they put themselves and their businesses and their customers and their data at risk in the longer term. So it's about interoperability, not just with feds, but also with customers. The U.S. government, and I can only speak for the U.S. government and only in a limited way for what I do. But as I was alluding to, we're not going to be alone in this transition as well. It's going to be, and it needs to be at scale. So other governments, other large businesses, suppliers, and vendors will be coming along with this as well. So kind of get on board or become an untrusted partner, and all of the, not just tech and spec risk, but business risk that comes with being an untrusted partner.
And what is really interesting to Matt, in what you're saying, like timelines are now known. 2030, you said 2030, and then 2035, you not be eligible to actually go out. We know of technology projects that go on for 5 years, and 2030 is in 5 years. Like, this is not a long time from now. Although it might feel like 2030, this will be in front of organizations.
This is tomorrow for the, for the government.
Exactly.
When I'm working with people who do satellite systems and NASA and next generation Artemis and moon missions, and with large scale industrial control systems. And, these are long-lived projects and programs that have been well underway and well developed going forward. Colin had, we talked about resilience. He also threw that agility word out there as well. So it's going to be, some of us will be able to plan for, to procure, but some of us are going to have to be in the upgrade path just because of where they are in their technology going forward. So it's going to be long, it's going to be complicated, it's going to be difficult. We've done these in the past at smaller scale. We're generally bad at them. So we're taking a lot of those lessons learned from where we've done them bad in the past and trying to apply them.
Fascinating discussion. Thank you. I have a couple of questions that are coming from the audience. If maybe
Mhm.
we can address them. So Tarek, thank you very much for asking this question. Tarek is asking about the trust and specifically between financial institutions. We touched it on a couple of minutes ago. So amongst financial institutions, Tarek says the trust function may migrate, therefore, from SWIFT system as the mediator between global financial institution to a bank-to-bank one. Like, could adoption of this kind of cryptography, assuming it's safer, um, perhaps take over the function of Swift? Is that potential scenario?
I think it's more likely that Swift will upgrade as well. I think all of, if
Mm.
you recall what I was talking about, the cryptography, then the transport layers and so on,
Yeah.
all of the transport type mechanisms, they're certainly looking at it. A lot of them have plans in place to upgrade there too. So I would suspect that, and sadly we've seen, I don't know about Swift specifically, but a lot of the transport mechanisms are planning to upgrade and
Yeah.
will do so. So I don't think, because I think the question also sort of alludes to another aspect around cryptography in terms of being able to see or not see, or having different. I don't think that this migration of cryptography will change any of the philosophical reasons for using cryptography.
Yeah.
It'll just do it in a different way. And by the way, you notice that none of this relies on having a quantum computer to implement that cryptography,
As
right?
a
I
matter
know
of fact,
I just
yeah,
wanted to highlight that again, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, Another thing that I wanted to ask, like we're discussing the erosion of trust and this solving the current cryptography as a risk to erode trust. Um, is there a link to blockchain technology as another way that we have tried to solve for trust? Is there do these two things interact at some point in like
They
any
do
comments on that?
interact, but maybe not in the way you're thinking of.
Hmm.
So, you know, like we were talking earlier about encryption being a trust foundation. A trust foundation in blockchain technology is, here we are again, encryption.
Yeah.
And so the hash functions and the PKI structures that are used to provide assurance of the blocks and then also the chaining in the architecture of a blockchain use encryption. Um, ag- Again, the trust model, the trust basis. There are digital ledger technologies, blockchain technologies that are using current asynchronous encryption that will have to upgrade in order to stay secure for the future. So the intersection there is, yeah, they have a trust basis on crypto as well. And yeah, they will have to have a migration and transition decision point for their future going forward also.
Yeah, and maybe if there's a follow-up to the event with some links, one of our Deloitte colleagues, Zitan Barmes, is based in the Netherlands. He published a nice little paper on this a couple of years ago. It's received quite a bit of interest, where he says, yes, there is a risk. There's some nuances there in terms of how that risk manifests itself in that technology. But as Matt said, the underpinnings of it is based on the same asymmetric cryptography, so it's subject to the same risk.
This is fantastic. I mean, thank you so much. What I would love to do is I would like to ask you if, in your closing remarks, we're coming at time. Perhaps what would you like? I would love to, Matt, you, Irene, you as well, and Colin. Like, what would be your advice to a client who might be listening to this, a CIO, CTO, CFO, CEO? What should they be doing about this next? Not today, April 1st, 2025. Maybe Matt, we can start with you.
Yeah, pop into your favorite search engine, PQC Transition Risk Management, and just pull down a couple of the higher level risk management advice, guides, and papers to help you go through a deliberate, risk informed process to start this journey. Um, you can do this with thought, with deliberation, and with planning. And there are plenty of guides, assistance, and references at that level, at that C-suite level, to start with your education, with your awareness, with your understanding, and then to prime you to start now asking those questions of your staff and of your partners and of your vendors. So reach out, search out. There's help out there. You're not alone. A lot of people have been thinking about this, and there's a lot of good guidance out there for you.
Fantastic, Matt. Thank you for that. Colin, how can Deloitte help?
So we have a lot of the material that Matt alluded to there, and we've been helping engaging with industry quite a bit. We actually collaborated with the World Economic Forum for a couple of years to get their program started back in 21 or so. So there's a lot of things there. The additional thing that I would say is a lot of the things that one would do to become cryptographic resilient are very aligned with what we sometimes term as cyber hygiene, things that you should be doing in any event. Cryptography has become endemic. It's coming through the back door, the front door, the windows, the chimney. Like it's used everywhere in the house, right? That's part of the problem is it's just everywhere. We've depended on it so long. So when you start, I was kind of to add to that analogy, I guess, it's never a bad time to go look in the attic. You'll find things that have nothing to do with quantum or quantum cyber readiness, but oops, that certificate is expired, or so if you were to look back 10 years from now, and let's just say there's a world where a cryptographically relevant component never existed. Let's say it never happens, right? Because there are some people that think it will never happen. Would you look back and think all those efforts were wasted time? No, because a lot of it is fundamental things that need to be done in any event. And maybe there's another attack around the corner, right? You got to be in that place where the bedrock of our trust needs to be much more resilient than it is today. And that's not a waste of money.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Irene, take us home.
Yes. So sitting in the office of the CTO, I get the benefit of working with our quantum team and a lot of exciting things. And I just want to call out that quantum holds the potential to transform many fields, right? In life sciences, financial services, we've talked about that. But that great change also comes with these risks and specifically around security. And so if we want to take advantage of quantum in all of its positive and beneficial ways, we also need to fortify the defenses that we have now and really making sure that we get that buy-in from everybody that needs to be at the table and start doing that yesterday, right? So taking action as soon as possible.
That was awesome. So Matt, Colin, Irene, this was wonderful, enlightening, insightful, fantastic. Thank you so very much. We are at time. The session has been recorded and soon we'll post it on our YouTube channel, TechTonic Conversations. With that, have yourselves a lovely Tuesday, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.